Thank you everyone for joining today. I'm really excited to be doing another webinar with John. John is the head of Global Outside Counsel Management at UBS. I think we were just talking, this is our maybe fourth webinar together or panel or speaking engagement. So we're well acquainted and we've worked together for 4 years now, I think it is, in partnership with UBS and its outside counsel management program. You're one of my favorite panelists because UBS has arguably one of the strongest outside counsel management programs of our customer base. It's been really impressive to watch what you've been able to build over the last couple of years and before our PERSUIT relationship as well. And we're at that time of the year where our clients, our in-house teams are really thinking about their panels for next year and asking us for advice on how they might structure those, how they might get the most value from their panel firms, and importantly, how they actually manage those firms and how they get ROI. I think that's the area that most mature outside counsel management programs kind of run into the most friction is how do I actually measure the return on investment from my panel? I think, John, you've had your panel in place now for 2 years, and so you've started to really be able to measure that value. I'm going to pull up a slide that shows what your panel structure is first, but did you want to just start by maybe introducing yourself a little bit more to the group, maybe just explaining a little bit more about your role and how we've kind of found ourselves in this position with your current panel structure?
Yep. Okay. So my name is John Burke. I'm an attorney. I've been with UBS for 28 years now in various roles, both inside the legal department and outside the legal department. About 6 years now. Years ago, the general counsel came and asked me to take over the lead for outside counsel management because at the time he was getting significant pressure from the CEO to reduce legal costs, and our costs were exorbitant at the time. And so, we basically started a program to try to reduce those costs, methodically looking at both the demand and how we could control the demand. And we introduced concepts like smart sourcing. But then we also looked at the firms that we were using. And at the time, we were using a significant number of firms, like over 1,000. I think it was 1,200 at the time. And so we had no real leverage over the spend because we were spreading it so thin across all those different firms. It was difficult to actually extract any discount or benefits. And so that's when we started to really look at changing the way we do things. The first step was try to create a list of approved firms, right? Get away from just everyone using whoever they felt like, and really taking that list of 1,200 down to something a little bit more manageable. So we got it down to like 400, I think, at the time. And then we had a change of leadership at the general counsel level. And the new general counsel came in and she had a clear vision of what she wanted. She wanted deeper, more meaningful relationships with fewer firms. And so I saw that as an opportunity to further reduce the list of firms and create a panel structure. And so the idea was we would set up a global panel of a very select number of firms, and we would negotiate very aggressively with those firms because we had a lot of money that we were spending. And so we used that as the carrot to try to extract as many benefits, such as discounted rates and free secondees and volume discounts and free legal advice and free training, et cetera, right? And then below that, we saw that we had a large amount of spend in certain jurisdictions where we thought a panel would make sense. So we created a layer called country panels in 16 different countries. And then we still had the need for little niche firms, tiny little firms in small jurisdictions where we were spending like $500 to deal with them. And so we went back to one of the global panel firms and asked if they would partner with us. They had a large network of small firms that they already had in place. And so we supplemented that network and created what we call the hybrid model for smaller jurisdictions where we can engage these small law firms, but the billing goes through the panel, the global panel firm. And so this hierarchy that we've created, essentially, we wanted to drive as much work to the global panel firm as possible. So every in-house counsel must look to engage the global panel firm first as a priority. And it's only in the case of the global panel being unable to do the work, either they don't have the expertise or they don't have the people in the jurisdiction, that then the in-house counsel would be allowed to go to the country panel. And so that's essentially the hierarchy that we've created. And as I said, we essentially really kicked it off live 2 years ago. And we've driven a lot of work to the global panel firms. And it's worked out really well because now we've gotten this entire number of firms down to 170 overall, which is a lot more manageable. And it really helps drive the more meaningful relationships because we have so few firms. And so we really know who they are, how much we're spending with them, what expertise they have, et cetera. It makes the relationships much stronger.
Thanks, John. We're curious just with this structure, a lot of clients I've seen will establish panels based on practice groups or specific types of work. Is that something that you had considered layering into this, and what was that choice?
We did look at that, but the firms that we use in those countries had pretty large practice areas and the ability to serve us across a number of different subject areas. And the way we did it, actually, I kind of skipped a step, right? We went out to the general counsel and her direct reports, right? The GCs in the regions and in the functional areas. And we asked for representatives from them to sit on what we called cross-functional teams. So we created these cross-functional teams in each region where we had representatives from all the different practice areas in group legal. And then we gave them the statistics that we had, all the data that we had around the prior use of the firms that we were using. And we said, there's lots of firms in this list that, we're spending very few dollars on. It takes an enormous administrative burden to keep them live in our system, in our contracting system, and also go through the whole information security reviews that have to happen so frequently. And so using that cross-functional team and sharing with them the data, we were able to drive them to choose the fewest firms possible. And we said, here's the list of firms. Tell us who you absolutely must have. Mm-hmm. And then who are the firms that are nice to have, right? And then we drove them towards the must-haves, right? And that way we were able to get that list from 1,200 down to 170.
And did you experience any other friction points going through that process? I imagine it required perhaps change management, perhaps a lot of conversations with practice group leaders and high spend engaging attorneys. What did that conversation look like?
Well, everybody had their favorites. And so, the first time we went through the process, there were a lot of firms that were selected that only had one person that wanted that firm. Mm-hmm. And so then, we got rid of the firms with little or no spend, right? But then we had this list of firms with one person that wanted them. And then we challenged that person in front of everyone else, right? In the cross-functional teams. We said, why this firm? Why do you need this firm? And then the peer pressure that came from the others in the cross-functional team was actually very helpful because it was able to drive, right, that person to go away from the firm that they were just selecting because they were good friends with that firm or they had, history with that firm. And what we tried to do is we wanted multiple people to be choosing the firms, right? And if you had, two votes or more, then you were going to be on the panel. If you didn't have that many votes, then you really needed to make a strong case as to why you were the only person that wanted that firm.
I wanted to start this webinar by just showing what your actual panel structure was, so that when we got into how you're measuring it, how you're driving our ROI, there was an understanding of what your structure was. And that's because a lot of clients or a lot of in-house teams that we've seen view panels very, very differently. I am seeing a couple of questions in the chat, and I want to encourage anybody that's got questions about UBS's panel hierarchy and their framework to ask those questions before we move on, and we might answer a couple of those. And just while people put their questions in the chat, I might just kick off a poll, because I'm curious from the group, and something that we really want to get at today is how confident are you that your current panel is delivering measurable ROI? Because we can put the work into creating the structure for the panel, and we can do the change management and negotiate with our firms. But I think what teams are really interested in is how can I actually measure the impact of that? And I've already seen a couple of questions on that topic. So I'm curious from our audience today, who is actually confident that their current panel is delivering measurable ROI? I'm going to give it about 30 seconds. Oh, there we go. There are the results. Okay, so most people not confident, which is unsurprising. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how, John, you're actually able to manage that panel to deliver the results that you're looking for, and tell that story internally. Just before we move on, a couple of questions here. So in the global panel, I could see that that's really focused around driving stronger partnerships, two-way partnerships between your firm. And you can see that through some of the value adds that you get from that partnership. A lot of people think about panels as an opportunity just to get the most effective rates and the most competitive rates, but they don't realize that there's so much more value you can get from that partnership with your firms. So you can see a couple of examples there. Of course, discounted rates and volume discounts are important, but there are other things there that UBS gets from this relationship. We did have a question about the employee exchange concept and what that is.
So that is a situation where we can get secondees from the law firm. But what we also try to do is have someone from UBS go and sit with the law firm to work on UBS matters in the law firm itself, right? Okay. And the idea would be that would be a 3-month or a 6-month secondment back to the law firm working on UBS matters. It really helps build a much more meaningful relationship when you have that two-way sharing of people.
And just before we move on, any other major value adds that you've seen be really effective in that global panel partnership?
Well, I think it starts with having the relationship being managed at the top level of the legal department. So for each of the global panel firms, they have a relationship partner, right? That is a direct report to our general counsel. And so it starts there. And so there are exchanges with, they'll do coffee chats, they'll do town halls, they'll do, continuing legal education classes. There's so much more pro bono events, things that we can share with the law firms that, aren't on this list, but there's a laundry list of things that we do with these global panel firms.
And then, of course, the question that probably everybody's thinking, which is probably where we're going to get to at the end of this webinar, but did you see that reduction in outside counsel spend?
Yeah, actually. And that's one of the problems, right, that we're facing right now is we were so effective in negotiating discounted rates and volume discounts and everything with the firms that the amount of money that we're spending is actually reduced significantly, right? And so, the implicit, quid pro quo with the law firms is in exchange for these benefits that you're giving us, you're going to see an increase in the volume of work, but also an increase in the revenue that you're generating, right? And in many cases, it stayed flat or actually went down, right? And so that, to me, what that means is that we have still too many global panel firms, right? We have 11 now. I think that we could almost reduce that in half, because I think that as the trend is showing us, right, if you want to really leverage the spend and get as much out of these firms, you need to be able to show them that the work is going to be there for them. So
And then one more, because I can see the questions that the other questions are going to be addressed in later segments. But how often is this panel refreshed or revisited?
So when we originally set it up, we were thinking of a 3-year refreshment cycle. But as it turns out, we do almost an annual refresh, right? So we do a look back for the year, and we review, how effective was the panel, what was the spend, what were the benefits that were derived. We have a benefits tracker, um, and uh, we look at firms that are underperforming, right? That, they're not approaching the volumes of work that we thought they were going to. And at that point, the question is, should they stay on the panel, or is there something that we should do to probably prop them up and support them? Because I could put them on the panel. It doesn't mean that they're guaranteed to get the work from the in-house counsels. The in-house counsels are the ones that ultimately make the decision as to who they think are the most qualified to do the work for them. And so in some cases, it's a matter of marketing the global panel to the people, right, that need to know who they are and what they can do and the capabilities.
The
Um,
attorneys
yeah, the
themselves?
attorneys themselves. And so I will do introductory calls. I'll do, um, you know, pitches to the, it's either in a region or to a functional area, and say, hey, we got this global panel firm. They're not really getting the kind of work that we thought they would. Could you please hear them out? Maybe bring them in, let them do a pitch to you guys, and see if we could maybe use them for 1 or 2 matters and let them prove themselves, right? And then that way, the door is open for them, right? That's my commitment to them. I will make sure I open all the doors for them. They have to do the sales pitch, and then they have to actually demonstrate that they can do the work, right? And if they don't, and if the numbers stay the way they are, then it looks like they'll be dropped from the panel, right? If they're not generating, it's not good for them and not good for us if they're on a panel and they're not getting to work.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Before we keep going, I just want to do one more poll. I want to understand, how do you currently track performance expectations with your panel firms? Because that's where we're going next. Either you don't track performance at all. I think we're talking about on the matter level, but also on the general relationship level. Are you doing periodic reviews? Like, for example, a lot of clients will do quarterly business reviews with just their very, very top spend firms, and annual reviews with a broader cohort. Do you have metrics and KPIs, spend as well as outside of spend, on performance of the matters? Do you have a dashboard? Just go ahead and share the results to that. Okay. That's pretty good. So most of the audience are having periodic reviews. I wonder how many of those reviews are very data driven, and where can you refer to metrics or KPIs? Do you have the visibility into performance to have that conversation? Oftentimes we hear from clients that they'll go into these conversations with firms, and the firm will say, how do we get more work? And it's a very one-way conversation about how to get the firm more work, because the teams having these reviews don't have the visibility into the performance of the matters, how competitive their spend is, where they are sticking to agreed pricing proposals at the outset versus where they're deviating. So, John, it sounds like this is something that you do really well, because you are a strong internal advocate for your firm partnerships, and you want to make sure that they're getting value from being on the panel. But I imagine you are also very much managing their performance on that panel, and you're tracking KPIs, you're using data to understand which firms are the top performers on the panel. So can you talk us through now, you have this panel structure in place, you have the hierarchy, and you're starting to manage that panel and measure its effectiveness. What are you working on now?
So we track how much spend the firms are receiving basically on like a monthly basis. We also look every quarter at the volume of work compared to the volume discounts that we've negotiated. We look at the secundii. So we have a benefits tracker that tracks the usage of, the free secundies, the free legal advice, all that. And then we have an annual relationship meeting with the law firms. And before that relationship meeting, we'll go out and we'll solicit feedback from all the in-house counsels that have worked with that law firm across a number of different survey questions, which results in a rating for the law firm. We do the same with the law firm with another set of questions that we ask them because we want to have feedback on their view of the world from that side. And then the relationship meeting is very structured, very formal. It has all of the spend data, all the benefits data, but it's also an exchange of the survey results, and anything else that might be a challenge to the relationship, so we can work on it. And one of the things I do with not only the global panel firms but also some of the strategic country panel firms is I will share with them the PERSUIT results, right? So how many auctions were they? How many auctions were they invited to? How many did they end up winning? And then I offer them to see all of the matters where they weren't invited, right? And so that then opens this whole other area for them as to why they weren't invited, right? They may say, we're expert in this, this area of securities regulation or whatever, but the matters that went, they weren't even invited to those. That to me is going above and beyond, right? They really appreciate that. And that has allowed us then to make, like I've talked before, the introductions, opening some doors to make sure that, in the future, they would be considered. And if they're not being considered, why? And we get to the bottom of it. And so that I think is really important to help, build that deeper, more meaningful relationship in the end.
I do want to provide just a bit of a context and zoom out for a minute, because I'm cognizant that a lot of our audience may not be familiar with PERSUIT and the engagement process, but UBS effectively has business guidelines where for matters over a certain value or with certain characteristics, they actually go out to their panel firms and run a competitive RFP. And
Yes.
oftentimes that competitive RFP will be negotiating an alternative fee arrangement. So UBS has a lot of spend under really effective alternative fee arrangements like phase-based fixed fees and capped fees. But oftentimes those matters will also go through a real-time bidding process like a reverse auction where the firms can see. So attorneys for the majority of high spend matters are actually assessing their panel firms on a matter-by-matter basis, or for some portfolios, and making a selection of which panel firm is best suited to that matter. So the data that you're talking about is where you're going into a conversation with these firms and you're looking at the data for the matters that they were actually invited to.
Yes.
Where they weren't successful and why they weren't successful in being selected for that matter.
Yes. And in addition to that, also sharing with them the data on the matters where they weren't even invited in the first place.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah. And that opens up a whole nother area of business for them potentially, right? Where, if you go back before PERSUIT even existed, they weren't even considered, right? The way the transaction happened was the in-house counsel picked up the phone and they called their favorite partner at their favorite law firm, and then the business was transacted that way.
Yeah.
Now, because of PERSUIT, right, it's much more competitive, right? There's between 3 and 6 firms that are invited to participate. But if you're not even getting invited, then you
Why
have
not?
absolutely no shot to get the work at all, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to open the door for these people, right? To give them the visibility of the things that they're not getting invited to and find out why, right?
Yeah, because you've got 11 global firms. You're not inviting 11 firms to every single RFP. You're probably inviting three, maybe five
Yep,
of those
exactly.
firms. And
Yep,
it's probably that they're getting invited to matters for repeat matters that they've already done before.
yep,
Let's say firm A always gets invited to UBS's IP litigation work.
yep,
So you come in and say, I'm noticing that you're getting invited for these types of matters, but you're not even getting the opportunity for these other
yes,
areas. What introductions can I make? How can I pitch you internally to those attorneys and open
yes.
up more opportunities for you to get invited? I imagine they love that conversation, John.
They love that conversation,
Yeah.
yes, because that's an eye opener for them, right?
Yeah.
Um, they never had a chance before, and now they're getting the opportunity. But that's part of the quid pro quo of the being on the global panel, right? You're a special firm. We're going to treat you special, and we're going to try to make opportunities available to you that didn't exist before.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I want to get into maybe a bit more granularity around the data that you're using to inform some of these conversations. Tell me a little bit about where you're sourcing this data. I know that you've got that example we just spoke about in PERSUIT, but there's also, you mentioned using forecasting templates
Yeah.
and benchmarking data to better negotiate AFAs and compare what you're getting versus what is available in the market. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those data sets?
Yeah, so we do competitive bidding for new matters, right? So it's pretty straightforward. We have certain thresholds. If a matter is expected to cross a threshold, it has to go through PERSUIT, right? And be competitively sourced. If it goes through a higher threshold, then it has to go through the e-auction process through PERSUIT. But that covers a portion of the spend, right? And what we've seen is that there's a historical amount of matters that have a large amount of spend that we can't put through. Traditionally we would never even consider to put it through PERSUIT because those firms are already engaged. They've been engaged for years, and the matter is just continuing. So we brainstormed with our global head of litigation, and we said, is there a way that we could increase AFAs for existing matters? And the idea that we came up with was we would use what we call a detailed forecast template, which is basically you go out to the law firm and you say, for this particular matter, which is one of our top matters, right? It's an expensive matter historically. We want to know for the next 12 months, what activities are you going to conduct on this matter? How do you intend to staff it in terms of the different timekeepers? And for each of those timekeepers across those activities, how much time are you anticipating they will spend on those activities? And what that gives you is a very granular look at the next 12 months. It's a forecast that then you can drill into to see, okay, they're going to do this, they're going to create a motion for summary judgment. They're going to put this much partner time on it, associate time on it, paralegal time on it. And that gives you an opportunity to then challenge it, right? And so in order to be able to challenge it, we went back and took 5 years of our historical billing data, and using AI as support, we're building the ability to create benchmarks, right? And then we'll use those benchmarks to compare against the forecast activities, and where we think that the forecast activities make sense in terms of pricing against the benchmark, we would try to negotiate an AFA for the forecast. And it may be we'll negotiate an AFA for certain activities within the forecast. Maybe not all the forecast will be AFA'd, but everything would be going through PERSUIT essentially as the platform to enable us to do this. And where we think the forecast and the activities and the pricing associated with it are in excess of the benchmarks that we've been able to create, we would even consider going back out for competitive bidding on that existing matter, right? And so that we think is going to drive an increase in the number of AFAs, and we'll have at least some comfort knowing that based on the benchmark data that we have, that we're making good deals. Where we can't be certain with the benchmark data, we just won't enter into an AFA. We'll just keep the discounted rates for those. And then ultimately, where we see there's a huge disconnect between what they're projecting and what we want to pay, we would go back out and competitively source that.
What have you noticed is the outcome on performance when you put that kind of time into negotiating an AFA? I'm using like the example of the motion for summary judgment is a good one. You look at your benchmarking data, you look at what they're forecast, and you might say, okay, based on benchmarking data, here is where we think that should cost.
Yep.
So would you commit to a fixed fee or a capped fee for all of that work?
Yep.
I know a question that a lot of people have, and that we certainly don't get as much visibility into, is how that actually plays out at the end of the matter. Are you seeing improved performance in terms of how the invoice compares to what was initially agreed, or are you still seeing a lot of deviation?
So we've used this detailed forecast the last couple of years, actually, especially with the integration of Credit Suisse coming over. We inherited a large number of very complex legacy litigation matters, right? And so we use the detailed forecast as a tool to try to, understand where are we going with these cases in the next 12 months or 24 months. And then by shining, the flashlight on it and putting that focus so intently on what are you actually doing, how are you staffing it, and how much time you're spending on it. We would then go back to the law firms and say, based on what you're telling us, we think you're off here. We think your staffing is too high. We want a lean staffing model. We think you have too many partners here. We think this is excessive time for this kind of activity. And by doing that, you're showing the law firm that you're paying attention. And then what we've seen is once we've done that, we notice that the actuals coming in for the next 12 months are actually much less than what the original forecast was that they gave us. And so by doing that process, which we thought was a one-off because it was part of the Credit Suisse integration, we've decided that we're going to do that now as a annual routine thing, right? Because when we spend the time and the effort, we see incredible results.
That's the perfect cost avoidance formula. I imagine that lands really well in conversations that you're having with your finance team, with
Yes.
leadership team.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's incredible the results that you can generate by just spending the effort to really understand what are they planning on doing and how are they staffing it, right?
Yeah.
This lean staff model is something that we've really embraced. And what we've asked the law firms to do is, you're giving us the detailed forecast template. I want the names of the people. And I'm going to put the names of the people into a supplemental engagement letter with you for the next 12 months, right? So that I know exactly who's allowed, and only essential people should be allowed to bill on the matter, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're going to change somebody, you're going to swap somebody out or add somebody, you need to come through us and tell us what you're doing and why you're doing it.
I'm curious, that's kind of a nice segue into our next segment, which is how generative AI is starting to influence some of this. You already mentioned how you're using it with those forecasts and to surface benchmarking data. Can you tell us just a little bit more, expand on that, how you're seeing AI influence pricing, staffing, how you're having relationships with your law firms, even perhaps how that's impacting law firm spend on the invoice?
So my favorite question to ask law firms in our relationship meetings is, when are we going to start seeing the savings that you guys are generating? Because you're investing millions of dollars, right, in AI, and you're not doing it just for fun. You're doing it because you see a return on investment, right, that you're going to basically realize all these benefits and efficiencies and time savings. And as a client of yours, I would expect to see that passed down or passed through to me.
Mhm.
And so when am I going to see the results? And the common answer I get is we're still investing. Um, we're not there yet. We see a light at the end of the tunnel, but we have layers of validation checks and everything else. So it's actually costing us more money now to do the work. We haven't passed that extra cost on to you, right? We've kind of eaten that. But at some point in the future, you may be able to see the benefits, but we're not there yet. And I've even had a firm tell me that they don't expect us to see any benefits because what they see is that AI will help them administratively, but it'll free up the partners and the ones that are actually doing the legal work to do more legal work, more thought, right? Put more thought into the analysis. So the quality of the work will be better. The price won't go down.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a very diplomatic response to that.
Yeah, I tried not to laugh out loud
Very
when they said
convenient
that. Yes.
answer.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's costing us today, it's costing us more, and you're welcome for not passing that cost on to you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, let's pivot back into how you're using generative AI then to improve the way that you manage firms, to improve the way that you are tracking potentially their performance, and what that might mean for how you structure your panels in the future, and how you might even assess the next panel refresh that you do.
So I think that there's a lot of uses. We just had an internal workshop with my team to really go through every aspect of what we do and analyze whether we think AI, and we had a data scientist, data engineer that sat with us, right? And she basically is a genius and someone who's really involved in the AI program in the bank. And we walk through every single aspect of what we do, and almost across 95% of what we do could be enhanced with AI.
Wow.
So next year, right, we're already planning of, what are going to be the priorities? Where can we focus our energy and our attention and our money to actually start implementing AI and embed it within what we do? So I think it has a huge upside to it ultimately. And you look at, the contracting process, all of that can be touched with AI easily, right? And we're already looking at, some of the products on the market like Harvey to help us there. You look at the selection of law firms, right? The analysis of data. We're already um, looking at the invoice process of auditing the bills, and not only just auditing to, compliance to the billing guidelines, but taking it to the next level. And we went out on the market and looked at products that were available to see if any of them already had AI built in and could take us to the next level beyond just simple compliance to the billing guidelines. And what we're talking about is, can it tell me, task appropriateness?
Mm.
When a partner is doing work that an associate normally does, right? Time appropriateness. Is the task taking someone twice as long as it would normally take someone else half the time, right? Those types of insights, if you can generate them out of your invoices that are coming in,
Mm.
would be mind blowing, right? Having a conversation with the partner and saying, we rejected your bill because, you billed us 25 hours for something that normally takes 12 hours. Those are going to be, earth shattering conversations, I think. And
Yeah.
we'll have AI and the data to back us up, right? All that
Yeah.
benchmarking data that we talked about is being supported by AI, right? So you can't do that with normal people. You can't do it's just too much data. But
Yeah.
now AI is going to give us that leg up.
Yeah.
And I can already see it. I've had the conversations with the law firms. They're already using AI to run our invoices through their AI tool prior
Yeah.
to them going out the door so they can be compliant to the billing guidelines.
Yeah.
So there's going to be this war between, their AI tool and our AI tool.
Yeah.
Ultimately, hopefully our tool will be better.
It's interesting because you may not have the AI infrastructure today to be able to query that data, but you've been collecting that data. I mean,
For
for us, at
years.
least 4 years, but before
Yep.
that, years and years,
Yep.
that as soon as you have the ability to query that data in an automated way, you can say,
Yes.
tell me who my top performing firms are for the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
How are
Yeah.
they performing with invoices against proposals? Because you've got all of
Yep.
that proposal data in
Yep.
PERSUIT.
Yep.
It's fascinating what you're going to be able to do with it, and you'll have a real head start on that just because you've been collecting it for so long.
Yeah. And who are the most efficient law firms, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be telling, I think,
Yeah.
right? Because you do almost side by side comparisons with same type of work, but who's able to do it more effectively and efficiently?
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating. I mean, you may not even need the panel infrastructure in a couple of years because your AI will tell you who your panel is based on performance.
I think you're right, actually. And I think you're going to have a lot less firms, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
I mean, the other question I always ask the law firms are they thinking about how their firm is going to be restructured based on AI and the evolution of AI?
Mm.
And some firms are really thinking about it, right? And they're having like partner offsites and thinking about like the impact AI is going to have on their firm, and they're already thinking of reducing their summer classes and reducing the number of first year associates they bring in.
Mm.
And then other firms are clueless. It's almost like they're almost in denial, right? That it's going to impact their firm.
I'm curious what your advice would be in circumstance. I mean, we have a lot of clients come to us and they say we're going to establish we're a brand new legal operations team. We don't have an outside counsel management program, and our first step is we're going to establish a panel. Is there value in doing that before you've created the structured approach to engaging your firms and measuring their performance, and you've got them on alternative fee arrangements? Or would you start with actually starting to collect that data first and then using that to inform your panel in a
I
year?
think I think I think you have to control who is able to engage counsel first,
Yeah.
right? You got to start with you can't have everyone in the company being able to pick up the phone and calling their favorite firm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so controlling how the demand is managed is really, really important, especially who's able to approve the spend, who's able to approve the use of a firm. And if you can get that done, which can be done pretty quickly through
Mm-hmm.
policies and other means, then you can set up a panel and you could start with the firms you're already using, right? And my suggestion would be look at the top spenders, right? And start maybe creating a panel around those top firms that you're already spending the most money with.
Yeah.
And then over time, you could refine it and make it better with the data, right? Once the AI kicks in.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay. We might address, I can see quite a few questions coming through in the chat, and I want to have a chance to answer some of these where we haven't addressed them so far. So first one, do you measure individual matter performance by firms on panels? I think the answer to that was yes, you do. You're
Yes,
collecting that data.
yes,
And that's through
absolutely.
the survey that you send out to your attorneys, but also through the billing data that you're comparing from invoice to
Yes,
proposal.
yep.
Okay. Did UBS create any guidance to attorneys on what fee structures to consider for different types of matters based on the details of each? How is the fee structure decided?
So we have conducted AFA training across all of the different teams so that they understand what an AFA is and when it's appropriate and when it is not appropriate. Because I think some people are enamored by AFAs and the sound of it sounds great. But if you don't have the ability to understand whether it's actually of value to the firm or to
Mhm.
the bank, then you shouldn't be actually accepting it. And so we've given the training, and when they go through PERSUIT, for example, we give them the options, and then we explain to them like what each option means. And then when they go out and get the bids in from the law firms, if they've asked for an AFA, whether it's a cap fee or a fixed fee or a blended rate or whatever it is, um, then we work with them to understand the implications of that. And so I think there is a higher level of understanding and awareness now with the in-house teams when AFAs make sense and when they don't.
And that process is self-service, by the way, too. You've got your attorneys actually scoping these matters, negotiating the AFAs. They are selecting counsel themselves, but you've set up I guess the guide or the templatized approach to help them to do that.
We support them. So there are in-house counsels that are very adept at doing PERSUIT auctions and running the whole process themselves. And then there's others that need a little bit of help. And so we offer the help and we encourage the help, right? Because we want them to have a successful, bidding process or auction. And so we do have a very small team, right? Vincenzo and Ankit, who help them if they need help scoping, if they need help understanding, what kind of pricing model they should take. There's support there for them.
Yeah. There's a lot of questions. People are very curious about the process to go off panel. How often do those exceptions come through? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Do you limit the number of off-panel engagements that are allowed? Why are
Yes.
people wanting to go off-panel?
So off panel is something that is strongly discouraged. In fact, our general counsel made it a point to say the exception process has to include me ultimately agreeing to it. And she told me a story as a younger lawyer in an in-house department. She wanted to use a non-panel firm and went to the general counsel to get approval. And the general counsel told her, no, you have to use the panel firm. And she was frustrated and angry and didn't understand why, they were being so stubborn. But she went out and she used a panel firm, and the experience was fantastic. And she said from that moment forward, she realized that general counsel actually did her a favor because she, opened her eyes to something that was, um, important. And so she said, now I'm a firm believer. We have 170 firms available that are panel firms, right? Global panel and country panel. I find it hard to believe that there's any kind of legal issue that they couldn't handle. So, so it's very hard to get an exception. I can tell you that.
I guess that's what's valuable too in not having panels necessarily that are limited to matter type or practice area as well. So that you're not just engaging with a panel for the team within that law firm.
Yes,
You have the whole firm
the
on
whole
your
firm.
panel. So
Yeah,
you should be exploring any specialties that they have before you feel like you need to go off panel.
exactly.
And that's where you come in making sure that the attorneys are aware of what's available within the current.
Exactly. Right.
Okay. Have you seen any instances where the quality of work is compromised when the cost is reduced? So maybe
And
in that example of forecasts, where you look at the forecast and you negotiate an AFA and you've seen reductions there, this is the question we get all the time. Well, are they going to
yeah,
put the B team
yeah.
on
No,
board?
and that's the question that was the concern that the in-house counsels had when we rolled out PERSUIT, for example. They felt like if they got a low bid, that the law firm would put the B team on it. And so into conversations with the law firm on any matter, there's always the talk about the pricing, but there's also the talk about how you're staffing it, right? And that's why we want the names of the people, right? We want to know who you're actually going to bring and put on it. We want the individuals that are going to comprise the team who are going to, successfully handle the matter for us. And so I don't think we've seen any instances where the B team was put forward, because if it was, we wouldn't accept we wouldn't accept it, right? We would reject it and tell them, give us the A team, or, you're not getting to work.
And because you're having so many really intentional conversations with your panel firms about their performance and relationship management, if that happened, that would be addressed. pretty quickly.
Oh, almost instantly. Yeah.
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 Okay. We did already talk a little bit about AI influencing traditional billing models. Is there, what would you like to see, or what would you expect to see once we get over this initial adoption hurdle? What would you expect to see in the next couple of years is the impact that AI would have on spend?
I would hope that spend would go down. Um, I would think that the efficiencies gained by the law firms would be passed down to the clients. But I fear that the law firms would need to keep their revenue high enough so that the partner share is what they expect. And so what may end up happening is their rates may increase significantly for the partners, because ultimately you're going to have, instead of a pyramid shaped law firm, you're going to have a silo shaped where there's not this huge bench of associates that are doing a lot of the grunt work. That's all going to be replaced by AI, and you'll have very few associates, and those associates will be almost like apprentices working underneath the partner to ultimately replace the partner at some point. And so, the law firms may see AI as something that is going to disrupt them,
Mhm.
but they can't. They're going to need to change the model in how they operate, and maybe they'll just do more work, right? They'll get more work and keep that revenue up.
Yeah.
But there's going to need to be a balance between what they're charging in terms of hourly rates, and that's going to actually push them and push us towards much more of a AFA model, right?
Yeah.
Don't tell me about rates, just tell me how much it's going to cost to do this piece of work.
Exactly. Okay. This is a question we get a lot as well. I mentioned cost avoidance earlier, which is the avoidance of an increase in expenditure. There's also cost savings, which is technically a reduction in cost. How do you look at cost savings versus cost avoidance? Do you consider them the same? How are you talking about or thinking about savings across all of these different initiatives?
So I think so. We calculate savings, right? As we were going to spend the money anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right? We didn't have a choice, so we were going to spend the money. Are we spending less because
Mm-hmm.
of something we've done? And so when we talk about using PERSUIT, for example, if we were to use the firm in like the historical way of just picking up the phone and calling the firm, and they were going to charge us whatever they were going to charge us by the hour, there was going to be a certain fee associated with that. But now that we go through PERSUIT, we get competitive pricing. We take the average of the bids that came in, and we use that as the measure against the bid that we actually accept. And so that difference is what we consider to be a cost savings, not cost avoidance, it's cost savings, because we would have spent the money anyway. We were forced to. Cost avoidance to me is we chose a different route or a different way to do something, and therefore we avoided the cost. We weren't going to spend it anyway. We had a choice.
One more question before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what percentage of your matters are still based on traditional billing methods versus AFAs?
So almost all the new matters are AFAs because they're being driven through PERSUIT. Um, it's the historical legacy stuff that's usually the old-fashioned way of hourly rates. And so I would say it's probably 60% legacy hourly rates, 40% AFAs.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're making meaningful progress to transition a lot of that legacy work over to an AFA through this forecasted approach.
So the goal of our project with our global head of litigation is it's called Project Flip,
Yeah.
which is flip the ratio. So, we want to go 90%, right? 90% AFAs if we can.
all of your spend, 90% of your spend under alternative fee arrangements.
Yes.
And is there a fee arrangement that is best in class for you? I know you're still using some hourly rate models with AFA incentives like capped fees, blended rates. Do you think about those differently, or is it just anything that is not a traditional budget estimate by hourly rate?
Anything that's not traditional
Yeah,
budget estimate, yeah, is AFA to us. And
amazing.
we're open. I mean, we are, I've told my law firms this all the time, right? We're open to any idea, no matter how crazy it is. If you have a financial structure that you would like to put in place,
Mm,
let us know what it is and we can see if it works for us.
yeah. And I imagine you find that your firms are really willing to work with you on this, that they are very collaborative when it comes
Yes.
because of the strong partnership that you built in your panel program.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
I mean, it goes back to the deeper, more meaningful relationships, right?
exactly. Yeah. And remind me, how many attorneys roughly are in the UBS legal department?
900.
Wow. So
Yeah.
this program has scaled across 900 attorneys and
Yeah.
globally.
Yeah.
That's very impressive.
Yeah.
Well done, John.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much for the conversation today. If there are any questions we didn't get to, our team will reach out in a follow-up. If you're interested to know more or you want to have a conversation with someone on our team, please reach out. We can have a follow-up conversation about this. We just released a white paper on panels and how to get value on them, which touches on a lot of what we've talked about today and gives you the frameworks and the playbooks to do that. John, I want to thank you so much again for sharing your expertise. It's quite profound what you've been able to achieve,
Thank
and
you, Laura.
I'm sure the audience really, really appreciates your insights today.
Thank you, Laura. It's been a pleasure as always, and I look forward to our next webinar or
Our next
panel
chat.
session. Yes,
Yes, me
our next
too.
chat.
Me too. Thank you
All
so
right.
much. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.